Hello to everyone out there. I'm Karatik, and this evening we are going to be taking a look at the current astrology. So, give me just a minute or two to set things up, and then we'll dive right in to its many mysteries. There's definitely a lot of craziness happening with the astrology currently, that's for damn sure.
Craziness happening.
And our audio is good. I mean, the current astrology is an overwhelming storm of anomalous activity. All right. Charging my phone because it needs that. Let's see here. Hope everyone likes my new thumbnail. Hey there, Ryan. Good to see you. A weird man has taken you hostage. Oh no. Do tell. Well, that would not be all that surprising considering the current astrology that we're going to be looking at this evening. What should I tweet? Let me think. Should I say, let's look at the fresh anomalies of our current astrological climate? Should I say, let's look at the complete and total mutiny of the senses that everything currently is? I think I'll just say, looking at the current astrological data and its ominous, anomalous overtones. Okay, let's see. Yes, I'm coming to you all from a very dark and gloomy, rainy, mysterious evening here. Perfect for looking at the mysteries of the universe. Okay, the tweet looks good. Let's see. Get the astrological data pulled up. I appreciate your concern. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tune into the stream tonight, spending time with my bandmate. Oh, that sounds like fun, though. Should a fun and viewer-filled stream. Well, thank you so much. Well, thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. And have fun with your bandmate. Sounds like lots of fun. I love such rendezvous. All right. Getting the astrology window pulled up now. And let's see, everything, I think everything looks good. All right then, so without further ado, let us begin. The sun continues its transit through the sign of Gemini right now. The moon has moved into Sagittarius, and we are getting very close to a full moon, which will happen on June 17th in the sign of Sagittarius, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. I guess I should also say, in case anyone pops into this who is new, we're taking a look at the current astrological weather, which essentially is where the various planets and luminaries are now, how they are aspecting one another, and it's stuff that affects the entire human race. So if you're not all that familiar with astrology, just know that basically this is the stuff, the astrological data that affects everyone right now, as opposed to what many typically associate with astrology, though we may get into specifics as we go, like for specific signs, certain things, but I'm not really into that. I don't really do that. We're going to look at the current overall data, and if there's something that affects certain signs a very specific way that seems worth mentioning, then I will mention it here, as I typically do in these streams. So let me think here where we should go next. So with the moon in Sagittarius this evening, and for the next about 2 days or so, it should be at this point, the mood is a bit lifted overall, but it is weighed down, or continues to be weighed down, sort of almost in the background, but not entirely in the background, by some of this other very difficult activity that we've been seeing recently, particularly Mars opposition to Saturn and its upcoming opposition to Pluto, which basically Mars being at 19 degrees, almost 20 degrees of Cancer at the time that I'm broadcasting this, and Saturn at 18, almost 19 of Capricorn, Pluto at 2233 of Capricorn. I mean, it's basically opposite both of them. We've also got Mercury and the North Node in the mix. Mercury at, hang on one second, 18 degrees 7 minutes of Cancer, therefore conjunct Mars, and the North Node at 1742 of Cancer, at least the way that the North Node is calculated by planetwatcher.com, which is a very convenient website for looking at the transits. As I've said before, I highly recommend it. So we've got this stressful energy of this Mars opposition to Saturn and Pluto, this Mars, Saturn, Pluto opposition going on. And, I've talked about this recently in other streams, and I don't want to get deep into it right now, so I'll just kind of sum it up. One of the reasons that it's very stressful is that essentially Mars says go, Saturn says stop. They're opposing one another right now. Pluto, of course, is very powerful, and it's also the deep, dark, unconscious realms, the issues we don't want to face and stuff like that. And that's opposing Mars, with Mars being our assertion, aggression, willpower, what we fight for, and things of that nature. And so those are, against one another right now. And then, as I mentioned, much more recently, because Mercury is moving very fast right now, we've got Mercury in the mix. Mercury is our mind, our thoughts, our communication. Mercury is joining up with Mars in this opposition to Saturn and Pluto. So, I mean, what can I really say other than that it's stressful as hell, before we hopefully get more into that later. But the good news is that, as I mentioned, at least for, a couple of days here, the moon is in Sagittarius. It's currently at 8:53 of Sagittarius. Make that 8:54. I just refreshed it. And so the mood has been lifted, given a much needed lift, I would say, into a more optimistic vibe, while this other stressful stuff continues to go on in the background. Now, I forget if I mentioned this, but currently the astrological data we're looking at is for the time of 9:09 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, June 15th, 2019. So adjust your time zones accordingly. And of course, as it says in the description for this, we'll be looking at the current astrology and some upcoming things as well, because that's what's most exciting and important for us here. So let's see, where should we go next? Actually, I'm going to grab a tissue real quick because that is distracting the hell out of me. So I'll be right back. One moment, please. Okay, I have returned. Sorry for the brief interruption. So let's take a look here. Yeah, Neptune trine, maybe even. Well, let's not even go there. I'll explain that later. But yes, Moon opposite Venus, temptations for like indulgence and maybe too much of what we find sweet and delicious and stuff like that. It can play out in relationships, as is the case with oppositions typically, especially if one person is sort of the moon, the emotional one, the other is Venus. Venus, what we love, what we like versus what we dislike, stuff we enjoy, stuff like that. But generally speaking, Venus blesses everything she touches. And so there's also great potential here for very delicious enjoyment of things. So let us remember that. Now, it's interesting because so Cancer season hasn't even begun yet with the sun at 24 degrees of Gemini. Of course, Cancer season will begin later this month, which do I have that here? On June 21st at 11:53 a.m. officially this year. Again, that's Eastern time. But we already have Mercury and Mars, as I mentioned earlier, pretty far into Cancer. Mercury at 18 degrees, Mars at 19 degrees of Cancer. With the sun back at 24 of Gemini, but we've got Venus all the way back at 8 degrees of Gemini. And so one interesting thing about this is in some ways it may feel like summer is here already, is like arriving early, but in other ways it may feel like summer is being delayed. And that's with that Venus back in Gemini, because you can literally look at the inner planets and where they are, since they kind of travel alongside the sun, and get a vibe for like almost what time of year, like what season it will feel like at almost any given time, or I guess, yeah, pretty much any given time. So interesting stuff there. Let's see what else can be said about this. Well, Venus in Gemini is an interesting place for Venus to be, because Venus is at home in the signs of Taurus and Libra. Those are the signs that she rules. And Gemini, I don't know. To be honest, I'd have to look more into this, but it's a little bit, it's not quite what Venus vibes with, but then again, I don't think it's that far off either, because Venus does rule an air sign, Libra, one of the two signs that planet rules. And so Gemini, a fellow air sign, is not necessarily so far off, but Venus in Gemini essentially says, a liking or even loving of curious things, intellectual things, playful things, changeable things, mischievous things, perhaps even. And maybe we can get more into that later, but sort of giving a little overview of that. Let's see what else. So I already mentioned, of course, Mercury and Mars in Cancer at this point. And another thing going along with that is with Mercury and Mars being basically conjunct right now, and that conjunction, where the hell is it? Perfects on June 18th, 12:06 p.m. Eastern time. Our thoughts and our communication is collectively getting much more aggressive right now, much more assertive, much more energized. And obviously, this is going to manifest differently in different people. But overall, for humanity right now, our communication, our words are getting very aggressive, especially with the added stress of that opposition to the Saturn Pluto conjunction that we have going on, this ongoing looming Saturn Pluto stuff. So let's see what else. Going along with that, Mercury and Mars. When Mercury is in Cancer, our thoughts become much more self-protective, much more cautious, careful, concerned with emotions, concerned with security, concerned with our immediate environment, perhaps our family as well. Rather than Mercury's home sign of Gemini, where Venus is right now, where Mercury is, perfectly playful and, very intellectual, very curious, and information going every which way, all of that. In Cancer, Mercury is much more slowed down. Our minds are much more slowed down, much more careful and cautious. And so that's the energy that we've got going on right now. But, it won't be that long until Mercury moves into Leo. That happens on June 26th, 8:22 p.m. And so then it'll be a whole different ballgame. And maybe we can talk more about that later. So let's see what else we can go over. Basically, summarize the inner planets. Jupiter continues its transit through its home sign of Sagittarius, where it is for almost this entire year. It is now retrograde. Saturn, of course, remains in Capricorn, virtually conjunct, or basically, yes, conjunct Pluto. Sometimes I'm a little unsure what I personally consider a conjunction, because I guess in astrology, technically anything within 8 degrees is considered a conjunction. I tend to think that's a little on the far side. I think maybe more like 5 degrees should be the limit, but whatever. In this case, they're only a little over 3.5 degrees apart anyway, so it's a conjunction any way you look at it. Though it does indeed appear to be the case that when conjunctions perfect, or the closer they are to being perfect, the more powerful they are. And we won't see the perfecting of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, as I mentioned recently, until January 11th of 2020. But the fact that that is looming this entire year, I know I've said this before, but it bears repeating because it's so important, means that it's affecting us this entire year. And they got there closest in April, by the way. I'm saying this yet again because it's so important. So look at your life and anything else you want to in other people's lives or the world at large. Look at what happened in April and know that that was a small dose of things to come in full in January of 2020. Mark my words, it's going to be intense. So that's some fun stuff. Let's see what else. Of course, on a more positive note, Mercury and Mars, for that matter, that Mercury-Mars conjunction right now is trine to Neptune. Mercury trine Neptune is our thoughts cooperating harmoniously with our imagination and dreams. And so, it's great for any kind of creativity. This is taking effect right now. Basically, it perfects in 10.5 hours. So if you're watching this tonight, if you're watching this tomorrow, this is an excellent time for creativity of all kinds, art forms of all kinds, writing, music, anything involving film as well, since Neptune rules film and movies and stuff like that. Anything involving fantasy realms, anything like that. This is an excellent time for it. That's a very beautiful trine indeed. As for Mars involvement, The Mars trine Neptune, well, we had that perfect 2 days ago, so it's beginning to lose energy at this point, but still a good time tonight for exercising things like the power of belief and acting on faith, acting on one's imagination, acting on intuition, things of this nature. And again, maybe we can look deeper into some of these things later. I'm just trying to give a summary right now. Let's see what else. We do have, in 14 hours, the perfecting of the Jupiter-Neptune square, which is the second time we're seeing this recently because of Jupiter's retrograde motion. This is the second of 3 times. The third time will be later this year. And Jupiter square to Neptune, I don't know, I've heard different interpretations of it, but basically what they say is the danger of getting carried away with fantasies, the danger of like not seeing reality clearly, the danger of sort of deception. You know, squares are, of course, challenging aspects, but it, you know, if you use the energy properly, that can also be great for exercising your dreams and imagination and optimism. But I guess the real danger there is don't let your optimism carry you away into delusion, you know, delusional fantasies. Like, keep your optimism in check, not be pessimistic, but don't be unrealistically optimistic is the lesson of Jupiter square Neptune. And actually, I'm going to pull up some stuff real quick. Should help with that. One moment. Okay, well, maybe I shouldn't go over all this. But yes, Jupiter square to Neptune, also be careful about deception and disillusionment, stuff like that, you know, illusions that mask the reality. Beware of that. All right, let's see what else we have here. Of course, speaking of Jupiter, Mercury, oh, did you guys hear that? Mercury is currently quincunx to Jupiter, giving our thoughts quite the boost of optimism also, in addition to the moon and Sagittarius, I would say, but quite the boost of optimism, but in a somewhat frustrating way because it's a quincunx that we are dealing with. And of course, that whole Mars-Mercury North Node conjunction is basically quincunx to Jupiter right now, which can be a bit tricky. But the good news, again, is that it's Jupiter. Traditional astrology, Jupiter is one of the 2 benefics, the other being Venus, which tends to bring good things, good fortune, good luck to what it touches. Though in modern times, our general thought about it is that it's not always that simple. But whatever. Let's see what else. There's like so many different things I can cover, but to be honest, I'm just going to cover what interests me the most because, I don't know, this is my stream and I'm kind of doing it my way because I want to. Perhaps what interests me the most will be what interests other people the most, what I find the most interesting, hopefully. Though if anyone has questions, feel free to ask. Let's see. Of course, Uranus continues its transit through Taurus. As we have talked about for a while, it's already at 5 degrees of Taurus. Breaking things up that we consider very fundamental, very unshakable, very virtually unchanging, you know, releasing tension and things that we that seem so set, I can't fucking talk. That seems so set in stone that we take for granted. And boy, that can be a lot of things, everything from like our food supply to where we live to anything physical, anything earthy that is not working for us, essentially. Economic systems as well, being shaken up over the next 7 or so years with Uranus and Taurus, with Taurus and its association with money. But, we're not going to spend a long time on that. We've already gone over that in, previous times. Let's see what else. I feel like at this point, maybe we should look up some stuff, as I like to do on these streams, because I think I've covered most of what is particularly interesting to me right now. So I've given a summary of things. Let's dive deeper. Let's take a deeper look into these astrological developments. On which, by the way, Neptune turns retrograde in 5.5 days from now. So there will be a subtle shift in the background coming up, and we're probably already beginning to feel it, involving our dreams, imagination, creativity of all kinds, spirituality of all kinds, and also on the negative side of such things, confusion, delusion, illusion, that we will feel on some level, but not exactly overtly. It's going to be something going on in the background, and it'll probably become much more noticeable in weeks or months from now, I would say. So let's see here. Obviously, one of the biggest things that we've got coming up is that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I know I've talked about that in recent times, but it's so important. It's one of the most important things this year that's affecting us more than anything else, that I think we should take a closer look at that right now. So I'm going to look up that, and we're going to study that a little bit. Well, it's really raining outside right now quite a bit. Let's see, astrologyking.com. Let us see what they have to say about this upcoming Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Saturn conjunct Pluto is a major planetary, I think it's supposed to say conjunction, occurring on average every 34 years. The last conjunction was in November 1982, and the next is in January 2020. When the two most serious and cold planets align, there are hard times. Restriction and limitation force you to, I think it's supposed to say, work hard at changing something particular in your life that has outlived its usefulness. This is a slow evolutionary process that builds new foundations on which to prosper in the coming years. Before more detail about Saturn conjunct Pluto 2020, all right, let's skip ahead to more relevant stuff. Oh, and by the way, the other very significant thing with Saturn-Pluto aspects is in between every Saturn-Pluto conjunction, there's going to be a Saturn-Pluto opposition, because right now, maybe I'll show this on my tablet after a bit, but right now we've got, like, if we looked at a 0 degrees Aries chart, we've got Saturn and Pluto up here at the top of the chart, basically in Capricorn. Well, this site is indeed correct. Every 34 years, this is what happens. They get right up here at the top of the chart. Well, in between that, every roughly 17 years on average, Saturn goes from up here to down here, or at least that's what it is this time. They're not always in Capricorn versus Cancer, for example, or whatever. They'll be at different parts of the chart, but regardless, there's going to be an opposition in varying parts of the chart. I hope this makes sense. Every 17 or so years between these conjunctions. And the last time that we had a Saturn-Pluto opposition was September of 2001. And I don't think I need to tell people what intense event took place at that time. But that is the kind of stuff we're looking at whenever Saturn and Pluto connect with each other in powerful ways. Particularly, it seems the conjunctions and the oppositions are the most powerful. So, yeah, when I say that this upcoming Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January 2020 is powerful, I'm not just talking for our personal lives, though it sure as hell will be. I'm talking for the world and humanity at large. You can look right back through history and see intense correspondences to these events, and maybe we can look into that later. So let's see here. Saturn conjunct Pluto transit. Saturn conjunct Pluto transit is a time of hard work and serious business. You will need patience and determination as you face extra responsibilities with less time and resources to get the job done. As this transit approaches, events and people will force you to concentrate your efforts on one particular area of life that is no longer working well for you. It could be a relationship or career or a particular belief or behavior. Something in your life has outlived its usefulness and is holding you back, even if you don't realize it at first. You may experience loss, hardship, or disappointment as you learn what it is that you must let go of or change. You may feel pressured or burdened by someone in a position of authority or a government department or large corporation. This may place a strain on your finances or force you to give up a hobby or family time. It is possible that a change in circumstances restricts your ability to enjoy other areas of life until you address the particular issue. If something is broken, you must fix it or throw it out. You cannot leave things as they are and resist the powerful forces that are at play. You must act responsibly, and you may even have to be ruthless in taking out the garbage. It is best to approach the coming change by accepting the inevitable and do what must be done. If you ignore what soon becomes obvious or stubbornly refuse to change, you risk complications that will make your life extremely difficult. Even worse would be to take shortcuts or cheat. Immoral or unethical behavior such as lying, manipulation, or breaking the law would have serious consequences that would further restrict your options and freedom. Accept change and go with the flow. Listen to your intuition and listen to the advice of professionals. This is a time for a deliberate, well-considered change. Once you let go of the limiting factors in your life, you can use determination and perseverance to build new structures in their place. This is a slow evolutionary process that builds new foundations on which to prosper in the coming years. Yes, and if there's anyone watching who wants me to see how that will affect them in particular in their chart, you can feel free to leave your birth date, and if you know it, the time of day and location in the chat, and I can look that up for you. Which I think I did that once before in an astrology stream, but this is stuff that is worth continuing to go over, considering it's one of the most powerful aspects that we've got going on currently. For me in particular, though, as I've said before, Pluto is over my Mercury right now, my mind, and this Saturn-Pluto conjunction perfects over my Mercury. So I'm expecting my mind to never be the same by the end of this transit. Which probably explains a lot about my life right now, but we won't get into that. So let's see here. Is there anything else I want to say about that before we continue? No, not really. Let's get into the interesting stuff. Oh, crap. What's going on with my coaster here? It's literally adhering to the glass. Anyway. Saturn conjunct Pluto 2020. The chart below for Saturn conjunct Pluto 2020 shows a stellium, including the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Pluto, and Ceres, all square Eris. Okay, we're getting into some esoteric stuff here. Bear with me. In mundane astrology, which governs world events, Saturn conjunct Pluto represents large organizations like multinational corporations, superpower countries, the UN, NATO, WHO, and trading blocs. Expect propaganda from leaders about power plays, world trade, genetically modified foods, and climate change. There will be debates, announcements, or agreements about these things. The masses will be skeptical and protest the changes being forced on them. China will expand its power and influence in an attempt to overtake the USA as the dominant superpower. Jupiter in the China horoscope is at 2235 Capricorn. Wow, that's interesting. Hang on one moment. Furthermore, there's another factor involved with this, and that is, of course, as I mentioned, Uranus moving into Taurus, which I believe I heard before, and hopefully we can look this up at some point, but I'm almost certain that I heard from astrologer Rick Levine, who really knows his stuff. I highly recommend his videos. That in the past, when we've gone from Uranus in Aries to Uranus in Taurus, the reaction to the intense rebellion that we see with Uranus transiting Aries, once Uranus enters Taurus, is often a political shift in various governments around the world to the right, to a more authoritarian modality. And so there could be a concern there as well. Obviously, I'm apolitical. I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm here to talk about just the astrology. Unlike Rick Levine, by the way. Funny that I would bring him up. Yeah, if you want politics and astrology, go to him, which I completely respect his right. He has every right to deliver it how he wants to, just as I have every right to deliver it how I want to. So again, I'm not talking politics except for as it relates to the astrology. And I wouldn't be surprised. It certainly makes sense to me astrologically if we did see that kind of shift politically to the right, to authoritarian modalities. And so, beware of that. I would say, if you're one who is politically active, I'd say definitely be on the lookout for that over the next 7 years or so. Continuing, it says, at the personal level, you will have to think seriously, ask questions, and seek advice before making plans about changing something in your life. The square to minor planet Eris gives an urge to rebel against restriction and take rash actions. Use patience and determination and consider how your plans affect those under your care, like your spouse and children. Then it gives a list of Saturn conjunct Pluto celebrities. Let me just sort of look through this briefly. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in there. Orson Welles. Of course, my being me, I don't even recognize most of these people. This is interesting. Saturn conjunct Pluto dates. It occurred on August 10th, 1947, November 7th, 1982. And of course, it will happen again. Here it says January 12th, weirdly enough. I'm pretty sure it's January 11th. Maybe it depends on the time zone, but of 2020. Then it'll happen again on... Oh, that's weird. I guess as a result of... it would have to be retrograde movements. Once we get to... I guess we're really going to the future right now, but 2053 and 2054, it'll happen 3 times, June 15th and July 10th of 2053, then again on February 2nd of 2054. God, I don't even want to think about that. But whatever, let's just continue. So that's it for this site. Let us also, for more clarity, consider for a moment what Saturn and Pluto represent. Saturn being all about hard work, order, structure, reality, discipline, pessimism, making things real, karma, you get what you deserve, law, justice, things like that. Pluto being all about cleansing, purification, the deep, dark unconscious, intense energy, all or nothing energy, all things dark and scary, things that we fear, things that are so normally so far beyond what we have access to that we can't even comprehend them, perhaps. Biology as well, Pluto relates to. And a lot of people don't like the word transformation surrounding Pluto, but that is a word that gets thrown around with it a lot. But again, as I've been saying recently, I think that maybe a word like cleansing or purification might be a better one for Pluto. And so, again, when we get these two planets together, I mean, it's hardcore. So, let's see, where should we go next? Give me just a moment here. I'm going to sort of check on the status of the stream. I think next, or here pretty soon, we'll look at some of the more immediate transits and aspects that we've got going on. Though I feel like there was something else I was considering mentioning, so let me just think for a moment here. Actually, I'm going to veer to another area. I got a comment on a recent stream, and if I don't look at it now, I'm never going to look at it. So let's just take a look at that real quick. Okay. Tiambi said, "Love your reading." Thank you, Tiambi. I appreciate that. I need to try to actually reply to these comments, though, when I'm, like literally type a reply when I'm not streaming. I apologize for that. But it's doing it this way is better than nothing, right? So let's see. Perhaps what we could do later in the stream, I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to do this, but we could look at specific recent events. And if we're lucky enough to get some chat activity going tonight, I don't know if we will or not, but if we do, perhaps we can have people comment recent events that happened on a particular day, and we can look at the astrology of those events, or even particular people, if anyone's interested in that, like celebrities or whatever. Okay, let me just see one other thing. Okay. So the closest main development that we have is Mercury trine Neptune. So I think we should look up some stuff about that next. Just give me another moment or two, please. Why am I not seeing that here? Okay, there it is. Yeah, Mercury trine Neptune, involving imagination, intuition, vision, and art. Put very simply, it's our mind, like I said earlier, working cooperatively and harmoniously with our dreams and imagination and spirituality, creativity, all things non-physical. So let's see what else we can find out about it. Mercury trine Neptune transit. Astrology King is the first result again. All right. Let's see what astrologyking.com has to say about this. Mercury trine Neptune transit. Mercury trine Neptune transit stimulates your creativity, imagination, sensitivity, and spirituality. While not such a good time for reading the fine print or studying factoids, your mind is ready to dream up fantasies or obscure theories. Your increased sensitivity to vibrational energy makes this a great time for working on anything involving harmonies like poetry, music, and dance. Drama would also benefit from your closer interrelatedness with others or increased empathy. All of your communication skills benefit from a non-threatening, caring, and soft influence. People will want to listen to you, especially in person, because of a sensual type of attractiveness. All of your senses are finely tuned so you can communicate effectively at the nonverbal level, through gestures, your eyes, and telepathically. Any psychic abilities will be enhanced, and your intuition will be strong and accurate. This is a good time for reading about such subjects where you don't have to remember endless facts and small details. This transit helps you see and feel the bigger picture, then convey it in attractive and simple terms to others. You can spread the word about abstract theories, politics, or religion. Fascinating. And again, that perfects on June 16th, that's tomorrow, 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. Mercury trine Neptune. And then branching along with that, or branching off of that, is, of course, Mercury conjunct Mars. So let's look that up next. This is, by the way, one of my favorite ways to sort of zero in on the astrological energy going on is to look up individual aspects. But remember, if you ever do this yourself, is that you've always got to take it together, like take all the astrological stuff, all the data in context. You can't just look at, one aspect and say that that's it. You have to take it in context with everything that's going on to get an accurate picture. Mercury conjunct Mars transit. astrologyking.com again. All right. Mercury conjunct Mars transit. Mercury conjunct Mars transit increases mental activity, making this an ideal time for focused and acute thinking. Your piercing intellect can also be put to good use in arguing your case and defending others against harassment or provocation. There will be an aggressive or defensive nature to your thinking at this time. This, together with extremely rapid response times, means there is a greater potential now for getting in arguments, losing your temper, and being unnecessarily rude or abusive. These attributes are fine when in a fight, but not so helpful in social settings or between partners. The key to handling this potentially provocative energy comes by gaining self-awareness of the buildup of nervous and impulsive energy. If you have no worthy cause to fight for, then apply this energy to mental work such as studies or investigations. Even doing a crossword would release the buildup, or I think it's supposed to say release the buildup of irritation and anger. Without using up this energy in a good debate or solving puzzles, you may encounter hostility in others. This could come in the form of threats, abuse, or intimidation. You should not back down from a fight, but should choose your battles carefully. Remember, this transit gives a tendency toward acting before thinking. All very good advice, I would say. Let's see, what else? Well, just to be thorough, again, that Mercury conjunct Mars perfects June 18th, 12:06 p.m. Eastern Time. Then right after Mercury trines Neptune, we have Mercury quincunxing Jupiter tomorrow at 8:03 a.m. So let's check that out next. Again, in my astrological opinion, Mercury quincunx Jupiter is a largely positive aspect. But let's see what we can find out. What else we can find out online? Searching here. For some reason, the quincunx, even though it is an extremely important aspect, it seems like it's a bit harder to find information about it. Let's see. Well, this isn't for the transit, but it applies to someone who has Mercury quincunx Jupiter in the natal chart. But for what it's worth, I'll read that real quick. It's just a paragraph. If you have Mercury quincunx Jupiter in your chart, and this kind of energy may be affecting all of us with a transit, similar energy that is, exaggeration is second nature to you. Whatever you focus on tends to grow in your mind without anything happening in the external world. Circumstances in life can easily seem much better or worse than they really are. Learn to trust other people's assessment and to judge life more on the concrete facts and less on moral pronouncements, which tend to be very colored by self-justification and avoidance. Sorry, there you go. Anyway, I'm surprised that can't find more stuff on that more easily. Mercury opposite Saturn occurs right after that. We've got so much stuff happening in the near future that is slightly concerning. Because, I mean, what we really have right now that's so concerning overall is, again, this Mercury, Mars, the North Node, all conjunct in Cancer, opposite Saturn and Pluto, pretty much conjunct, a little over 3.5 degrees apart in Capricorn. That's what everything's tied to. And also, well, the Mercury, Mars, North Node conjunction in Cancer is trining Neptune, which is theoretically good, but not always necessarily. And so that's getting all wrapped up in the mix too, that dreamy Neptunian energy. So Mercury opposite Saturn, that perfects tomorrow at 10:01 a.m. Eastern Time, June 16th. So let's see what else we can find out about that. Mercury opposite Saturn, our minds versus reality. And so, I mean, when you reduce that to very basic levels, one thing in particular that you see is two people who are in conflict. One may be seeing things in a very intellectual way or trying to communicate something, and the other person is representing the reality or limitation and is basically saying, no, that's wrong, or whatever. It's the mind versus limitation, or communication versus reality, stuff like that. Mercury versus Saturn. Astrology King strikes again. Let's see what they have to say. Mercury opposite Saturn, June 16th, 2019. Mercury opposite Saturn transit brings serious thinking and conversation, but also negativity and sadness. Poor self-esteem can lead to communication difficulties and isolation. Being alone, studying, or on the computer would feel more comfortable than being in social situations, with in-depth research offering a way to keep your mind busy. There is the possibility of some bad news or very challenging situations arising, especially if you have been neglectful in some way earlier. However, it is likely that you will be seeing the worst in every situation. This is not a day for making important decisions, especially about relationships. Also, avoid signing contracts or making big investments. You may have a critical eye, but could also make mistakes. All right, interesting stuff. All right, let's see what else we have. And again, that Mercury opposite Saturn is June 16th, 2019, 10:01 a.m. Eastern Time. So I think what I'm going to do next is just pull up the current astrology on my tablet, or at least the 0 degrees Aries chart that planetwatcher.com shows, just to show this, or just to show what's going on visually. So I wish I had more advanced technology for such things, but whatever. And I could just show my screen like directly, but that's okay. One moment. Let's see. Is this shit gonna stabilize or what? That'll have to be good enough. So here it is, as you can see here. This intense, let me see if it'll focus. I will make it focus. Okay. This intense opposition that I've been speaking of, you can see being formed by, I'm looking at my screen as I do this. It's a little tricky, so bear with me. Down here, the Mercury-Mars North Node conjunction, and you can see these red lines opposing Saturn and Pluto at 18 and 22 of Capricorn, respectively. Again, that is the reflective source of our current intense challenges, the vast majority of them anyway. So much of the stuff that I've been talking about, that I've been sort of concerned with. So wanted to show that, just help give a visual representation of what I am talking about. Let's see here. What should we do next? We do have a very harmonious Saturn-Neptune sextile, very supportive energy occurring in 2.5 days, June 18th, 7:46 a.m. Eastern Time. And Saturn sextile Neptune is very nice because Saturn is the reality, Neptune is the dream. When they cooperate, it is essentially the dream made real. Saturn, the reality, cooperating with Neptune, the dream. And so this, despite all the challenging aspects of our current situation, this is a very nice one indeed. So let's see what else. I don't know. I think I want to make things a little more interesting right now. I was hoping that there'd be more viewers tonight with like questions and comments on stuff, but I guess there's not, but that's okay. So I guess it's up to me to make things a little more interesting tonight. So recently on June 7th, I believe it was, Motionless in White released a new album called Disguise, and I fucking love it. I've been listening to it a lot ever since then. So why don't we look at the astrology of that album and see what data we can sort of tease out. And yes, you can indeed, for those who are unaware, look at the astrological data for stuff like this. You can look at it for anything that has a date, basically. At least anything on Earth. If something took place in space, I don't know if that would work or not. All right, let's see. I'm just gonna verify the date for that. June 7th. Yes, it was. Okay. So let's back up to June 7th, 2019. The album is a Gemini Sun, Leo Moon. So it's got that sort of fast pace Gemini vibe to it. It's also got that very showy, dramatic, passionate, inspired Leo vibe to it with the moon. That may be more subtle, but considering that essentially the sun and the moon, if you use a wide enough orb, form a supportive sextile with one another, I think that that's going to be powerful regardless. Let's see. The sun was moving into an opposition with Jupiter. I'm not quite sure how much that would affect things, but I think it would to some extent. So it's going to be a very expansive, very bigger, better, more album, going far, especially with Jupiter and Sagittarius. What else can we tease out from this? By the way, it's hot as hell in here right now. I need the air conditioner. The sun was only 2 degrees away from a square to Neptune that day. So there is a sort of tense inner conflict within the music between its, if we want to sort of anthropomorphize it, its sense of self and its imagination. But I think in a work like that, in art like that, it is probably quite the advantageous inner conflict, that tension being audible between its sort of conscious mind focus and the more dreamy, nebulous aspects of it. Let's see. Mars, it's Mars in Cancer, which of course Mars is still in Cancer now, but the album's Mars is in Cancer, making for deep, passionate aggressiveness, that emotional aggressiveness. And with its Mercury being in Cancer, as Mercury remains now, but when this album came out, it was at 5 degrees of Cancer. Its sort of mental focus is much more emotional and concerned with, the inner world, the private world, needs, wants, desires, stuff like that. And I think you can definitely hear that in the lyrics of various songs on the album. But of course, they still have other ones that are, classic, like sort of, like horror inspired, variations. So, but yeah, I just wanted to sort of briefly look at that. I don't want to spend like a huge amount of time on that. I think it's kind of fun to look at events like that. Let me think if there's anything else. I don't know. I might actually wrap this stream up here in a bit, and I don't know, maybe do another stream tonight or another kind, or maybe that'll be it for the night. I don't know, but let me think here. Yeah, I mean, truth be told, we could spend like forever, obviously, analyzing the current and upcoming astrology, but I think we've looked at things well enough. There's no need to get deeper into it right now. So I hope this has been of benefit. It wasn't quite as active as had planned, but whatever. Whatever, fuck it. Um, so thanks for watching, those who have been here throughout the stream, and those who watch when this is not live. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great night. May the stars continue to guide you in the right direction. Until next time, bye for now.